Hi, my loves. Welcome to another episode in Kinship. This is a podcast series dedicated to the incredible women who see themselves as dog moms or dog guardians and their relationship with their dogs in all of its different textures, shades, and tones. I am your host, Surabhi, and I'm really excited to talk about today's episode because it's really an invitation to see our relationship with our dogs, but also another very, very important relationship for some of us in completely new light. And this episode is really, um, you know, it's almost like a prophetic a message in so many different ways, especially for women who find themselves in marriages or in long-term relationships. That's been a big theme for me, that I have been really exploring in the last few months. And it's interesting. It's very timely because I kind of step into my 8th year of being married, and I've known my partner. We've been together for over 12 years. I've known him ever since I was 17 years old. And so I feel like so much of what the last 8 years, very specifically within the container of marriage, has been coming up a lot for me. It's something that I think I usually end up getting drawn to, where I'm just reflecting on what my time together has really looked like. And I think particularly it's very hard to discount the ebbs and flows that we've kind of moved through, through our individual, but also our collective relationship with our dogs. And so, this episode might come across a little far-fetched, but I invite you to kind of just really like stay with it and I think just and be open and be curious about what comes up for you through the course of this conversation. And so I want to start by sharing an observation. And the observation is really about a shift that I notice happening across modern marriages. And I've been working as a relationship coach outside of the work that I do with dogs for a really, really long time now. And so a lot of my work does involve working very closely one-on-one with women, and we move through the landscape of their relationships. And so this is also really coming from those observations where the shift that I'm talking about is a really like quiet, underneath the rhythm of daily life kind of shift. It's very subtle, but it's very much present, and it's kind of like unstoppable. And the shift that I'm essentially referring to is my experience of the fact that women at large are waking up. It's almost like that the veil has lifted and they are waking up to the truth that so many of the relationships that they have been living inside, including their marriage, no longer hold the fullness of who they are becoming and growing and evolving into. And so, I've seen this with my own marriage. I've seen this with my relationship. I have supported so many other women in one-on-one capacity to move through a very similar shift. And what is really interesting in this kind of like, in this dynamic is that for those of us who also have dogs, it's really interesting that the ones who often show us like what is truly possible in a relationship before anyone else does are those very dogs. And I think it's such an interesting observation that I've had because, again, I've worked with women who've experienced similar shifts and, moved through similar tensions in marriages where they don't have dogs. And I've also worked with women who have dogs. And both experiences are very, very different. And in the sense that I think what I have found is that when there has not been the presence of a dog to essentially turn to for this kind of possibility, I think women have scrambled a little bit more in the dark. It's very much like kind of extending our hands out there in the dark and trying to like grasp something, because again, there isn't this blueprint for this marriage and this new kind of partnership, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about it in more details. I'm not going to give away too much of it right now, but I definitely feel like for those of us who do have dogs, I think that possibility feels a lot more real and alive because of what we also share with our dogs. And that makes sense because our dogs walk beside us. And I think like with each gaze, with each nudge, with each moment of that kind of shared presence, they are really heralding something new, right? And they're reminding us that there is a way of relating that does not ask us to shrink, that there is a horizon of connection that we have only glimpsed in dreams or like in wishful thinking. And my episode today is really an invitation for you to step into that horizon and to step into a new dawn of partnership. And so I want to trace a few steps back before I start talking about what this new dawn of partnership is, because it is beautiful and it is big and it is so freaking empowering to experience that. But we'll take a few steps back. And what I want to draw, I think, attention to is the fact that at some point, pretty much every woman feels it. There is this quiet widening and expansion, right? And it's a very like subtle knowing that she cannot remain the same inside the container of her current marriage, right? And it shows up like in really, really small ways. It shows up in the hesitation before expressing a need. It shows up in suppressing a wish or a dream that you have for a certain career direction or a life that you want to start living. It's when you choose peace and harmony over speaking your truth because your truth feels so explosive and disruptive. It's when you choose to maintain status quo because evolution or change just feels really freaking scary. And I think most spaces kind of describe this widening as a dissatisfaction and a sense that, oh, this relationship is no longer working. I actually think it's not dissatisfaction. I actually think it's an awakening, right? I think it's something new that is wanting to emerge and take shape and form, not just within yourself, but within your marriage. And I think what's really interesting is that when we think about, our dogs, and for example, in this moment, my dog's kind of lying down beside me on the sofa, it's a relationship that behaves very, very differently. Right? Even if you start with some of the old scripts of the relationship, wherever those old scripts really come for you from, you very quickly realize that with your dog, there is actually no performance. You're not expected to perform. You're not getting rewarded in the same way like you would potentially get in other relationships when you perform. Right? You don't have to comply and your dog doesn't have to comply. And we realize that, compliance can only really deepen connection to such an extent, right? And you find that so many of the scripts that you perhaps like latched onto to show up in this relationship are no longer valid, right? What you realize along the course of the journey with your dog is that the relationship is steady, it's honest, and it is wide enough not just to hold all of you and your growth and your unraveling, but it is also wide enough to hold who your dog is and what your dog needs to feel safe and secure. And in that presence, you begin to envision the horizon, a marriage, a partnership, a life that can actually hold the full woman that you are becoming and that you are going to continue to become as you grow and evolve. And I think it's interesting because most women have been trained to shrink, right? Not because, we're weak, but because society, family, and tradition kind of have demanded it, right? And those are the systems at play, whether that's, toxic capitalism, colonialism, heteropatriarchy. All of these systems have shaped how women are expected to show up in spaces, in relationships, but have also shaped the conditioning and training that women experience. And so, very early on, we not just we witness other women, for example, in our family, other women around us, receive these messages, and we receive these messages. And the learning that happens really for so many women is to be easy to love, right? To always be agreeable, to suppress anger, to suppress, grief, to defer needs, to always be freaking accommodating, right? To always keep the peace, to, kind of like disappear just enough to maintain stability. So don't completely disappear, but just disappear enough so that things continue to fucking stay stable. Um, and again, I think like it's what is so heartbreaking is that so many women feel like these patterns are personal failures, right? And they just kind of like throw themselves in this really horrid cycle of judgment and self-deprecation and shame and guilt. But these are not personal failures. This is just fucking conditioning. And it just runs so much deeper than most women realize, right? Like there's a legacy of that kind of conditioning. And that legacy is shared by both men and women in our families, by the societies that we grew up in, the communities that we grew up in. And I think what I'm now noticing is that so many women are kind of like, are having this like aha moment where, they're essentially like all of this conditioning is like bumping against their own evolution, right? And they're questioning these scripts, they're starting to question these containers that are meant to kind of keep them small and keep them shrinking, when every freaking fiber in their body is demanding to grow and expand and take up more space and become more empowered. And again, for a lot of women, and this is true for me as well, it's actually in these moments that we end up opening our hearts and homes to a dog. And with them, when they walk into our homes, something new walks in entirely, right? It's a relational standard. Very honestly, it's a relational relationship standard that cannot be negotiated, that cannot be performed, that cannot be gamed. You kind of again recognize that the whole performance piece is only going to get you so far, compliance is only going to get you so far. Trying to fit yourself into a role that doesn't feel necessarily authentic is going to take your relationship only so far. It's going to take the quality of your connection with your dog so far. And so you kind of learn along the way that with your dog, you've got to be honest, right? You've got to be messy. You've got to be clear. You have got to be communicative. You have got to show up in ways that maybe you have never been asked to be before. Maybe you end up showing up in ways that you never thought were possible for you, and those reveal different patterns and conditioning that you're carrying. But either way, like when you show up fully, exactly is who you are. And, again, I want to call out that for so many women that I have worked with, like this is a genuine identity existential crisis, right? Like not knowing who they are outside of these scripts. But when you do show up fully, exactly as who you are, that relationship fucking holds. It does not crumble. It's not fragile. It's not, it's not put together loosely, right? It fucking grows. It is matter that is, put together with all of these like atoms kind of like binding together in ways that make it feel really solid. that relationship strengthens over a period of time, right? And so in so many ways, your relationship with your dog is actually the first threshold. It is the first portal to a way of connecting that is so freaking expansive and authentic and just unconstrained. And I think this is where I think some of the languaging gets really like lost. And so I want to clarify my take on this, because I often, talk about dogs being like mirrors to our relational patterns. And what I mean by that is they're not a mirror of your energy. So it's not like if you're anxious, your dog is anxious. If, you're stressed, your dog is stressed. Of course, they can pick up on that energy. But I don't necessarily refer to our relationship with our dogs being mirrors in that sense. I think to me, the dog being a mirror kind of analogy is really about heralding what is possible, right? It's really about like reflecting a reality, a possibility that we can claim for ourselves in our lives, in all of our relationships, right? And so, in the presence of our dogs in this relationship, you experience connection that does not depend on shrinking or explaining or performing. Your dog is teaching you that relationships can be expansive, they don't have to be constraining, that they can be really freaking honest, they don't have to be performative, that they can be built on attunement and it doesn't have to be transactional, that they can be steady, they don't have to be conditional. And once you start feeling these textures in different ways and forms in your relationship with your dog, it is just so hard to ignore places in your human relationships where presence, honesty, authenticity are just absent, or they just don't run as deep. And so your dog, in that sense, in the mirror analogy again, your dog is actually showing you that, babe, there is a new standard. There is a new dawn. There is a relational horizon that is waiting for you. And what are we letting go of as we kind of claim this new horizon, right? There is an old marriage model that obviously women are outgrowing, because most marriages were really built on models that asked women to self-contain, right? To absorb discomfort, to smooth conflict, to keep everyone else really comfortable. But in the presence of our dog, in the presence of this new possibility, we are learning that this is not the only way, right? I mean, if you start looking at dogs, whether that's with you or, I have the advantage of, accessing so many free living dogs, and I kind of see this social and emotional intelligence and this relational intelligence, play out on an everyday basis. They're showing us that connection can tolerate growth, right? That connection can hold presence without collapse. That connection values truth over compliance, right? And that connection does not have to be performative. And it's so interesting because just this morning, I was walking my dogs out, and I kind of, came across two streeties. One streetie is an old dog here, very familiar. He's friends with my dogs. And the other streetie is a new one who seems to have kind of gotten integrated with this streetie. His name is Sheru, into his world. But this new streetie, who's a female, absolutely hates other dogs around her. And it's possible that the other dogs around her, including my dogs, are just very like boisterous, younger, want to play. And this new streetie just cannot tolerate it, right? So, she's giving hardcore distance creating signals, lots of growling, teeth baring, kind of like letting just back the fuck away from me. But it's so interesting how, when she's kind of like decompressing and, really taking her downtime, she continues to sit next to Sheru, the old streety, but she's not sitting too close. She is not playing with him and she's not like getting up into his face, but she is just valuing the company and the social space that they share. And clearly there's something about that social space that makes her feel safe and comfortable. And the reason why I want to give you this example is because I think, I think about, and maybe like it's my reflection, right? Like I think about how in the earlier parts of my marriage, every time that I spend time with my husband, like I felt the need to be on. I felt the need to be positive and joyful and happy. Like this part of a relationship where I was just like, where I just wanted to have company without needing to be on, where I just wanted to like do my own thing, just wanted to tune out, but still want access to connection, did not exist. Right? Like it's something that I learned to do over a period of time. And so much of it came actually with my dogs, through my dogs, because we would just like sit together and watch the world go by or just hang out and sunbathe. And, none of us were doing anything, but I would feel so freaking connected with them. And I think giving myself permission to say, this is also what connection could look like in my relationship with my husband really did come from my dogs. And so when you, I think, start thinking about it, there are so many different links and threads that you will start see unfolding for you. And when that happens, you realize that the old rules just no longer satisfy. The old structures no longer contain the woman that you are growing into, contain the relational understanding that's expanding for you. Right? And you begin to see that you are being called into something so much freaking larger, that there is a new relational dawn that is freaking emerging. And I want to call this out explicitly because I think one of the risks of having this kind of conversation, especially in very conventional marriage type spaces, is the fact that this awakening is almost every time equalized to your marriage failing. And that is just so freaking far from the truth, right? It means that your marriage is actually being invited to evolve. And I think again, right? I think that's the experimentation process. That's the reimagination process. That's really about translating that possibility into action, which is, how much can my marriage evolve? How much of that evolution feels nourishing for me as I continue to evolve? Like those are the questions that we then need to start exploring, right? So the question is no longer, is something broken? The question becomes, can this container, can this relationship actually grow? And my sense is that, again, if we go back to the dog really as a proof point, so as to speak, your relationship with your dog shows you that it can, right? They show you that presence and honesty and authenticity can exist without fracture, right? And again, for so many of us, like, we started our relationship with our dogs pretty much on old scripts and rules, right? Like we were following random freaking training advice. We were potentially perpetuating alpha dog, thought patterns with our dogs. And look at how far we've come. We've moved away from that. We've discarded that. We've rejected that. And we've grown as people and as in our understanding of our dogs and our relationships with them. And we have created a new relationship, a new relational horizon with our dogs. And of course, that means that we can do it with all of our other relationships. And so, now you basically just carry that possibility with you everywhere, right? Into conversations, into love, into partnership, into marriage. This is the dawn of a new way of relating to yourself in this marriage, to your marriage as a whole, to your partner in this marriage. And I want to take this moment to kind of just introduce and talk about Untamed, which is my new group coaching space for women who are longing to co-create a marriage that feels like a living expression of authenticity and freedom, right? Untamed exists to help women cross that very threshold. to take the clarity and expansion they feel with their dogs and bring it fully into human relationships. To stop shrinking, to stop performing, to speak their truth, to hold space for both themselves and their partner, to step into this new relational dawn that we've been speaking about. Inside Untamed, women learn to embody the relational standard they have already glimpsed with their dog. Right? So it's not mirroring, it's not performing, but it's really living into what is possible for them. And so the doors to Untamed open from today at the most resourced investment that it is ever going to be. And so there are limited spots to access this resourced investment till the 28th of November. And so if you are interested in exploring what this container could look like and what it could shift for not just you and your marriage, but for you as a woman in this world with this awakening and this waking up, then check out the link in the podcast description or reach out to me on Instagram and get details. But I do want to take this opportunity to invite a few of you to really claim your spot in this space in a way that just feels really freaking nourishing. We are on the edge of a new era. Women everywhere are refusing to fucking disappear. They are stepping into truth, into evolution, into spaciousness. This is a dawn where love does not ask for compromise at the cost of selfhood. A dawn where connection can expand as you expand. A dawn where both partners grow without fear, without collapse, and without shrinking. Your dog already knows this. Your body, your nervous system already knows this. Your soul has just been waiting for something like this. So if you're feeling this shift, this quiet widening inside you, this episode is to step into something more. You are not imagining it. You are not alone. Your dog already knows what is possible for you. Fuck, your nervous system already knows what is possible for you. And now it's time for you to fully step into it. Untamed is here to help you cross that bloody threshold, to take what is possible in your relationship with your dog and bring it fully into your marriage.